procurement systems worldwide. Sasa kabla sijamkaribisha presenter, before I invite the presenter to come, I would like to introduce my two panelists and have them come up. Panelist number one is Bwana Gabriel Bujulu. Please come and sit. He used to work for TPDC, Tanzania Petroleum Development Corporation, and then he moved to the other side, and now he's with Energy Cards. Energy Cards, I'm going to be very, very interested in hearing what he has to say, because I'm expecting him to answer a lot of the questions that came from the floor this morning. Their purpose is to ensure that the public understands the investments that the country is making in the energy sector. So to take the language from up there, bring it to somewhere here in the middle, and help the public to see why it is important that it is done in the way that it is important that it is done, and what the benefits we're going to get from this are, as well as what the trade-offs, what we are giving up to get these benefits. And my second panelist is Bwana Theonat Mushi. Theo, please come. Yes, there you are. Theo's from Norwegian Church Aid, a well-known international NGO that has been in Tanzania for a long time, very, very involved in the accountability processes in advocacy, as well as within civil society, as well as towards the government. And he is going to talk about the experience and what NCA has learned about in implementing their own procurement systems at the international level, what they have learned in Tanzania, as well as what they have learned in other countries. And how this learning has translated into practice, what they have got from it that is positive, what challenges they have faced, and how they have addressed them. Okay, those are panelists. Now I want to invite my main presenter, Mr. Emmanuel Maligani. You heard him this morning. Please come. Yes. He's from the World Bank, and the crux of his presentation is going to be talking about a system that has been developed and is now very well known as the global standard for assessing procurement systems. How do we know that these systems we are putting in place are actually likely to succeed in addressing the problems that they are supposed to address and preventing the unaccountability that they are supposed to do? A lot of the questions that came from the floor this morning were about that. Yeah. Why is it? You can't hear me. Okay. Hello. Why is it that these problems that we're having keep happening, even though we have systems in place? Yeah. And how do we then go about assessing whether the problem is the system and its design, or the problem is its operation, how it is implemented, or the problem is whether there was a reason why, sorry, not a reason why, whether in the design we actually expected it to be implemented in the first place. Yeah, I hope he will talk about that as well. To address the very, the question I heard from that side of the room, the young lady, in a very passionate way, asked, so what about, we talk about, yeah, problems, but what is the way forward to make sure these problems eventually get solved? Yeah? In 1985, we were talking about these problems. In 1992, we were talking about these problems. In 1999, we were talking about these problems. Now in 2024, we're still talking about these problems. When does it stop being a problem, I mean a capacity problem, and start being recognized and openly spoken about as a commitment problem? And how do you assess then whether we're there and whether we will ever move forward? So please, karibu sana. Bwana Emmanuel, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Gertrude, for the very generous introduction. My name is Emmanuel Maliganya. I usually skip the middle name. I think I'm lazy. I'm a procurement specialist from the World Bank. I work together with my brother, Engineer Raymond. So we are in the procurement governance team, and what we actually do as procurement in the World Bank, because many people ask, what do you procure? So we actually don't procure anything in the World Bank. What we do, we support the government stakeholders when they're preparing projects that are financed by the World Bank. So we help them design optimum procurement approaches, which will help them obtain the best value for money. We also help the government in building capacity to the procurement and non-procurement officials. And we also help the government in driving procurement reforms to make the procurement system ready for supporting their national development, whether using the World Bank financed projects or otherwise. So that's a little bit about myself. And today I'm going to present about the topic which is on the screen, global insights into transparent procurement, gaining knowledge from worldwide standards and changes. And most importantly, I'm going to focus on that green line, a review of the methodology for assessing public procurement system, or MAPS. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, a little bit of what I'm going to cover. I'll give you a snapshot of the significance of public procurement in terms of some useful numbers which can show you how significant this thing we call procurement is and why is it a big deal. And I think we have been talking about this since yesterday, so kind of like building upon what has been already said. But I'll give you a quick comparative view of the public procurement standards globally, and then I'll spend most of the time in the methodology for assessing public procurement systems, because this is one of the standards which we think it's better for the stakeholders like you to understand and see how you can really use it as a tool to engage the government in the procurement reforms dialogue. And then, of course, I'll give you a quick case study about Tanzania, which is currently undertaking the assessment using the methodology. And then I'll leave you with some recommendations of what I think you may need to do after this conference. And finally, I have a bunch of resources which I will recommend for you to follow on after the conference. All right, so about the significance of public procurements. So we heard yesterday that procurement is accountable for about 9.5 trillion USD globally. You remember that figure, right? But then I want to give you in terms of other perspectives, that 9.5 trillion, what does it mean in terms of the GDPs? Now, so the percentages differ by region. If you look at in Asia, the percentage which is processed through procurement out of GDP is about 20%, which means take the gross domestic product of the entire country, 20% of it is handled through public procurement. That's a lot of money. And for the Middle East and North Africa, it's about 18%. In Africa in general, about 15%. For OECD countries, these are developed countries, it's about 12%. In European Union, it's about 14%. And Latin America is about 6%. What is the key message here? It is procurement is a big deal. We have to talk about it. It's a pipeline for a huge sum of public funds is spent through public procurement. And therefore, if we want to realize really effective development outcomes, we have to make sure that where this money goes through, the pathway where this money goes through is clean. Okay? Kama ni nyumba hakikisha kwamba haivuji. Vinginevyo utajikuta kwamba unapoteza kile ambacho umekitunza kwenye nyumba ile. Next. All right, so a little bit of a definition. We might assume that everyone knows what is procurement, what is public procurement. But I thought it's a good idea if we can put a brief definition here so that we can be walking through with the same understanding. So when we talk of procurement in the public sector, which is what we call public procurement, it's nothing but a process by which the public authorities, such as a government ministry or a department or a local authority organization, purchases goods, works, or services from the market. And so by purchasing, we are talking about the full cycle from when this entity identifies the needs, plans on how to source those needs, solicit from the market, evaluate the bids, sign the contracts, and manage that contract to ensure that what was intended is actually delivered or achieved. So that's what we mean by public procurement or procurement. Is there anyone who does not understand procurement so far? Because if you don't know what procurement, then the rest of what I'm going to talk about may not be very useful to you. So can you just put your hand up if now you know what is public procurement? I'm not going to ask you to come and explain here. Just put your hand up to show me that you understand what is public procurement. Okay. I'll assume all of you have put your hands up, even those who have done it silently. Okay, let's go next. All right, so when you talk about public procurement standards, I'm going to share it in two ways. First, I'm going to share with you about the public procurement principles. The principles that have been now universally accepted as these are the principles which any procurement system in the public sector must adhere to. And then, of course, I'm going to share with you a few standards which are existing now, and some of them have been there for a long time. But in terms of principles, any procurement system is expected to observe transparency, accountability, efficiency, value for money, and the rest will be in the next slides. But let me talk about these four first. Transparency means having open access to information related to procurement. And this includes the procurement opportunities and also how the selection process is handled, which criteria are used to select the winning bidder. So any procurement system has to have that capability. We have to know how the process is handled, which criteria are used. If you don't see that in any procurement system, that is not a good procurement system. Accountability. There has to be clear roles and responsibilities. Also a mechanism for auditing and oversight and enforcement of the procurement rules, compliance enforcement. Again, any procurement system which does not have a clear accountability mechanism is not a good procurement system. Efficiency. Any procurement system which cannot enable the government to procure on time and in a cost-effective manner is not a good procurement system. Value for money. Any procurement system which will not enable the government to procure in a cost-effective manner and to utilize its resources effectively is not a good procurement system. And other principles, sustainability, competition, integrity. So basically, sustainability is a new principle now which has been universally recognized, that it's not about only efficiency, effectiveness, it's also about environmental, social, and economic sustainability. What you are procuring, how does it save today's needs without compromising the needs of the future generations? That's what we mean about sustainability. Competition, again, is a very key principle of an ideal procurement system, ensuring that there's no discrimination, there is open and fair playing ground for any eligible participants to participate in the procurement process. And integrity, of course, here is about ethics, anti-corruption, and transparency in the decision-making process. And I think this is where Wajibu has been playing a very significant role in promoting integrity in the public sector, including in procurement. Now, on this slide, I intend to share with you a few of the procurement global standards, which do exist now. First is the unilateral model law on public procurement. So when the procurement reforms for most of the developing countries started in the 1990s, this was a very influential model. Most of the countries designed their procurement law using this model. It was kind of a copy and paste and do some little bit customization. So this is a very historical and renowned model, and it has been influential in the procurement reforms in Africa and the other developing countries. Another standard is the World Bank Procurement Framework. So we talked about in the previous presentation, the 6 core procurement principles Engineer Raymond shared. Those are defined in the World Bank Procurement Framework. Again, many procurement reforms in worldwide, they are being undertaken by utilizing effectively most of those principles because they are universal principles. We talk about transparency, accountability, value for money, fit for purpose. The OECD principles for integrity in public procurement is another standard which has been applied a lot in the public sector reforms, particularly in the procurement. And this one offers principles and guidelines to enhance integrity, transparency, and accountability in the public procurement. Another one is European Union procurement directives. Again, this one is most relevant for the European Union, not much in Africa or other developing countries, but it has been influential because as developing countries try to reform their procurement systems, they look for lessons from sometimes developed countries, and the European Union procurement directives have been also a source of inspiration, I would say. ISO on sustainable procurement. This is a new standard which is specifically on sustainable procurement. Again, this has been influential also in countries that are reforming their procurement to address sustainability. As you know, the first generation of reforms did not focus on sustainability. This is kind of a new baby. Oh, before you go, yes. Now the last one, which is a red ribbon for a reason, is what I'm going to focus on most of my presentation, the methodology for assessing public procurement systems. This, you would call it a standard or a methodology or a tool, but it is something which is suitable to all countries at all levels, regardless developing or developed, because it is a tool which is used to assess or to diagnose the situation of the procurement system in the country, depending on the context and also involving local stakeholders. So it's not like a prescription of what a procurement process should be, but it is a tool which is used to diagnose the status of the procurement system, the strengths and the weaknesses, and come up with a recommendation of what can be done to improve the procurement system by considering significantly the context of the specific country. Now, before I talk more about the MAPS assessment, which as I promised is where we're going to spend most of the time, I want you to listen to a video, to watch a video which talks about that, just to give you an introduction, and after that then I walk you through some of the specifics.
MAPS, the methodology for assessing procurement systems, is an international standard and the universal tool to evaluate any public procurement system anywhere in the world. Public procurement represents a large part of public spending. To provide essential public services such as hospitals, roads and schools, governments worldwide spend approximately $9.5 trillion in public contracts every year, which represents between 6% and 20% of the respective country's GDP. By using their purchasing power, governments can contribute to sustainability goals and boost innovation. Procurement must continuously improve to effectively deliver goods and services in a way that is both sustainable and inspires trust among citizens. The strengthening of public procurement systems is central to ensuring that public money is well spent and institutions operate effectively. But how can governments assess how well their procurement systems are performing? MAPS is the solution. It is a recognized assessment that evaluates how well public procurement systems work. It can be used at any level of government and by any country, regardless of their level of development. Originally created in 2003 by the OECD and the World Bank, MAPS was updated in 2018 and has already been successfully applied in many countries across the world. The MAPS methodology helps identify strengths and weaknesses of a public procurement system. It provides an analytical basis for concrete and targeted reforms, and it ensures their effective implementation by developing action plans. By showing what works and what does not, MAPS can support countries in implementing efficient, sustainable, and more inclusive public procurement systems, while also improving integrity and promoting transparent use of public funds. The methodology consists of several elements. A broad country context analysis to frame the assessment. 4 pillars comprised of 14 indicators and 55 sub-indicators to assess the procurement system as a whole. Guidance and templates to support the assessment, and supplementary modules to focus analysis on a specific aspect. But how do the assessments work? Several steps have to be followed. The preparation of a concept note, including objectives and logistical arrangements. The analysis of the country context. The commencement of the assessment and the development of recommendations. The validation of the main findings. The preparation of a final report, which includes recommendations on how to address the gaps found. And a quality assurance process conducted throughout the assessment by the Assessments Technical Advisory Group and the MAPS Secretariat. If a report fulfills the conditions for receiving the MAPS seal of approval, it is then published on the MAPS website. The MAPS Secretariat offers ongoing support to all users. It provides advice to country teams to plan and manage an assessment. And it also reviews, approves, and publishes assessments that comply with the methodology. Find more about the MAPS initiative on www.mapsinitiative.org. Email us at contact@mapsinitiative.org if you have any questions or want to get started using MAPS in your country. And for all the latest updates, follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn at MAPS Secretariat.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the next slide. Right. Okay, so this video is a high-level summary of what MAPS methodology is and you know, where it came from. It gave you a bit of a history, when it was established, by who, and what it does, what are the key elements. But then we're going to spend the rest of the time now to go in a little bit more details about that and to give you some real-life examples, some case studies, especially sharing about Tanzania, which, as I mentioned earlier, is currently finalizing the MAPS assessment. Next. All right, so now what's MAPS? This is a tool for assessing procurement systems. And again, this is exactly what has been explained in the video. It involves 4 pillars, and out of those 4 pillars, in each pillar there are some indicators and sub-indicators. In total, the methodology has 210 indicators. So when you are assessing a country's procurement system, you assess by each of these assessment criteria. So you have 210 assessment criteria, and there are under indicators. The total number of indicators is 14. So it's a really comprehensive methodology which it leaves no stone unturned when you are assessing a procurement system. But also, what does it really assess? It's how the procurement is operating in practice, from the planning stage to the delivery stages. And it uses information and data from multiple sources, which includes documents which are existing, surveys, databases, and also samples. It also puts a very high emphasis on engaging stakeholders so that the context within which the procurement operates is really captured. And the main output is a report, which is the MAPS assessment report, which within it you have a clear country context. You also have a clear indication of what are the strengths and weaknesses, but also what are the recommendations and priorities which the government is willing to undertake. Now, these three dimensions to look at a MAPS assessment. First of all, and this is something you can easily remember, it is a universal methodology. meaning that it can be applied for any procurement system at any level of the government, and for also any country, regardless the level of development. We'll see examples later, the countries that have already undertaken the assessments. It includes developing countries and also developed countries. So this methodology is really universal in that sense. And also, this is a reform tool because it helps to bring up yeah, okay, microphone inafanya kazi. Okay, great. So integrity, transparency, and also it is a reform tool because it helps stakeholders really to engage with the government. So it helps in the dialogue with the government. And I think this is very important for the stakeholders who are here because for the most part, you are not from the government. You are non-state actors. But procurement is one of the areas which you need to engage with the government so that you can help the government improve the systems and thereby realize the benefits which a procurement system is expected to deliver. And therefore, MAPS assessment tool is going to be one of your tools you can utilize. And again, by the presentation, I'll show you exactly how you can use that. And finally, very important, this is a recognized tool globally. Because first of all, it is very objective, it engages a lot of stakeholders, and also it guarantees the highest standard through quality assurance mechanism. There is a very rigorous quality assurance mechanism as you undertake the assessment using this methodology. So these three key takeaways, okay, that's fine, you can move. Now in a summary, what does this tool assess? Of course, value for money, transparency, fairness, and good governance. So these are the key areas where the assessment ensures that it has really captured how is the status of the procurement system in terms of enabling the government to achieve value for money. How is the status of the procurement system in terms of transparency? How is it in terms of ensuring fairness? How about good governance? So those are the key areas which the methodology helps you to assess. Next. So just to mention that MAPS is part of an assessment system. There are other assessments which are related to the MAPS, and examples of them, these are three. For example, you have the tax assessment system, you have the PEFA, Public Expenditure Financial Assessment. So this is to say MAPS is one among other existing frameworks for assessing the public sector governance and effectiveness. Let's go next. Now, to the heart of the methodology itself. We mentioned about it has pillars, it has indicators, and it has sub-indicators. So basically, the four pillars of the assessment, the methodology are: 1, legal, regulatory, and policy framework; 2, institutional framework and management capacity; 3, procurement operations and market practices; and 4, accountability, integrity, and transparency. So when you say pillars, what do we mean? So these actually are like the main criteria, the main aspects which the methodology helps you to look into as you review a country's procurement system. Now, under the legal and regulatory policy framework, you have 3 indicators, specific indicators, which we'll see later, but also you have 18 sub-indicators. And the assessment really happens at the sub-indicator level. Under the second pillar, you have 5 indicators, and you have 14 sub-indicators. Under the pillar number 3, you have 2 indicators, 6 sub-indicators, and the pillar number 4, you have 4 indicators and 17 sub-indicators. Now let me talk about what you see on the side. In addition to the to the core methodology, there is also what is called supplementary modules. So the methodology allows you to assess the entire procurement system of the country, but also it has modules that can enable you to assess a specific aspect of the procurement system. And currently, we have a module that can enable you to assess only the sustainability of your procurement system, sustainable public procurement. There's another one which can help you to assess only professionalization of procurement in the country. E-procurement, sector level assessments, like you can assess only in the energy sector, for example. There's a module that can enable you to do that. Entity level assessment. You can do an assessment of the procurement system at a specific individual procuring entity level. And also PPP, we are talking about PPP in the morning. You can decide to conduct an assessment of the PPP framework only, and this methodology will enable you. And of course, in terms of e-procurement, that also reminds me of Mr. Moshiro, your presentation yesterday. I don't know if he's here. Yes, I see you. So the government of Tanzania has done a fantastic, great job in the e-procurement, as we saw yesterday. Now, the government can decide to assess that e-procurement system using an internationally recognized standard or methodology, which is MAPS, to really diagnose it, to look at what are the strengths, what are the gaps, and how to close them. And of course, come up with a clear action plan of how to do that. Some of them could be short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So I think now you have another tool here that you can consider to use as you look to improve the e-procurement system even more. Next. So now, for each of the pillars, just to give you a quick snapshot to go a little bit in each of these boxes. Under pillar 1, I mentioned that there are 3 indicators. These are the 3 indicators. Number 1 is public procurement legal framework, whether it achieves the agreed principles and comply with the applicable obligations. And this, of course, includes compliance with international obligations. Under that, you have 12 sub-indicators and 50 assessment criteria, which we're not going to go into that. Indicator 2 helps you to look at implementing regulations and tools, whether they effectively support the legal framework. Indicator 3 looks at the legal and policy frameworks, whether it supports sustainable development of the country and implementation of international obligations. So under pillar 1, basically those are the indicators that are considered when doing the assessment. Let's go next. For pillar number 2, on institutional framework and management capacity, there are 4 indicators. Indicator number 4, which is on public procurement system, whether it is mainstreamed and well integrated with the public financial management system. Does the procurement law talk with the public financial management law? Because here you see there's a very close interconnection between the two. So this tool can help you to really see whether that is the case or whether there are gaps that you need to close. Indicator 5 looks at whether the country has an institution in charge of the normative or regulatory function. So again, in case of countries like Tanzania, this is no longer an issue. We have the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority. But this tool, if that was not the case, it would have helped you to flag that out, that you need to have a regulatory institution which can be in charge of the national procurement policy and legal framework. Indicator 6 looks at the procuring entities and their mandates, whether they are clearly defined. Indicator 7 is about public procurement, whether it is embedded in an effective information system. Again, the use of e-procurement is assessed using this indicator. And then the last indicator in this pillar is on the public procurement system, whether it has a strong capacity to develop and improve. Let's move next. So we are on pillar 3, procurement operations and market practices. This one has only 2 indicators. Indicator 9 looks at the public procurement practice, whether they achieve the stated objectives. At the end of the day, we have a procurement law not for the sake of complying with the law. We want the law to help the government to deliver services to its citizens. So that's the key objective here. And of course, not only to deliver on time, at a good quality, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, that is the procurement system achieving those objectives. Again, this tool can help you to assess that. Indicator number 10, Indicator number 10 is about the public procurement market, whether it is fully functional. So again, we are not looking at the law itself only or the government practice only, but also the private sector side. Do we have a functioning market? Is it fully functional? Is it effective? And if not, what should be done? Does the private sector have capacity? Do they even know what the procurement laws and practices look like? Next. Okay, so the last pillar, which is on accountability, integrity, and transparency, has 4 indicators. Indicator 11 to 14. 11 is about transparency and civil society engagement to strengthen integrity in public procurement. The methodology helps you to assess whether this happens. And then indicator 12 looks at whether the country has an effective control audit system, who does the procurement audit, and what happens after the audit. How are the audit recommendations really implemented, and who ensures that they are implemented or not? And I think Wajib and Mzee Uto here, this must be an area of your very high interest and experience. Indicator 12 is about procurement appeals mechanism, whether they are effective and efficient. When you talk of appeals mechanism, the international standards require that you have at least 2 or 3 levels of appeal. The aggrieved bidder, who is aggrieved by a decision of maybe an award of a contract, should have more than one avenue to seek redress. For example, the case of Tanzania, I think we know the procuring entity can lodge a complaint to the procuring entity itself, and if it is not satisfied with the decision, it can go to the Public Procurement Appeals Authority, and if not satisfied, they can even go to the court. So this methodology helps you to assess whether there is that kind of mechanism which can enable bidders to explore avenues for justice. And the last indicator is on ethics and anti-corruption measures, whether the country has an effective ethics and anti-corruption measures in place. Now, you can see it touches every area of interest. Okay? Well, when we come to discussion, you can tell me if there's any part in any aspect which is not well covered. But I think in my view, I would say the methodology covers all aspects of public interest when it comes to how their public funds are utilized through procurement. Let's go next. Now, who is involved in the MAPS assessment? So again, the methodology is very comprehensive. It involves a lot of stakeholders, and the reasons are: 1, quality assurance, to make sure that the output is really rigorously reviewed, but also to make sure that all pertinent stakeholders are involved, and therefore the outcome of the assessment is owned by the stakeholders, but also it really captures all the issues on the ground. So if I can start with the green button here, you have the MAPS Secretariat. So this is an independent organization which was formed by international development institutions and multilateral development banks. What it does is it came up with this methodology which we are talking about now here. So it is the custodian of the methodology, but also it provides quality assurance in the assessment process. If any country undertakes the journey of conducting the assessment, they provide the tools, the templates and everything, but they also review and approve the process as it goes. So that's a stakeholder number 1. You also have an assessment steering committee. If any country undertakes a journey of assessing its procurement system, it has to form a steering committee of high-level government officials who can make the decisions of how, what should be done, which stakeholders should be involved. So it's a committee that involves members from the public sector, but also from the private sector, as well as non-government sectors. And again, when I come to talk about Tanzania, I will share with you that that's exactly what happened. We had a steering committee, which coincidentally, Mzee Uto was also a member of that steering committee. And then you must have an assessment team. And the steering committee provides a high-level guidance in terms of the approach and who is to be involved. But there has to be a team then which does the day-to-day work of the assessment. And in the case of Tanzania, we had this team, which was a joint team between the World Bank and PPRA, because PPRA was the lead institution. Lead institution, again, this is a government institution which takes the lead in the assessment. Like in the case of Tanzania, it was PPRA. And it could be also in other countries, they have done, you find the Ministry of Finance is the lead institution in the assessment, or maybe an institution which is the equivalent of our Public Procurement Policy Division, a division which looks at the policy level of the procurement. And then you have many other stakeholders are involved, like procuring entities, the private sector stakeholders, the civil society organizations, education and training institutions, and other stakeholders are involved. Other country institutions can be involved. For example, in the case of Tanzania, we had to get data from the CAG office, PCCB, IAG office, etc., etc. But also, there is an assessment technical advisory group, which is a global team of peer, experienced peer reviewers or maybe advisors who work closely with the MAP Secretariat. So if any country undertakes an assessment, before the report is endorsed by the Secretariat, it goes to this team. They have to review it and provide their comments and to make sure that it is, yes. How many minutes? 10 minutes? Okay, I'll do my best. All right, so let's go next. Right, so now, I mentioned the stakeholders involved. I mentioned about the MAPS Secretariat. So on this slide, it was just to try to zoom a little bit more about what the Secretariat does, but I think I have already explained this. We can go to the next. Next slide. All right. Now, as you conduct the MAPS assessment, who are the main actors? Again, I have already explained them, but here of interest, I wanted to show you what are the main outputs, or the key outputs. When you do an assessment like this, first, you will have a concept note. This one is a key output because it has to define how you intend to undertake the assessment, which stakeholders are going to be involved, which objectives are you intending to achieve, how will you go about, which data will you utilize, but also clear terms of reference of the organs that are involved. For example, the steering committee. There has to be clear terms of reference of what is going to be their roles and responsibility. And finally, the main output is an assessment report, which defines the country context. It also defines how the methodology was applied, and then what are the results on each pillar and on each indicator. Next. Okay, so, when you do the assessment, you can have a good report. That's the output. But then, what is the really outcome? What can a MAPS assessment really help you, and what impact it can drive? One, it gives evidence-based understanding of what is working well in the country's procurement system and what needs to be improved, what gaps exist. So I think this is a very important outcome of an assessment. Another outcome is it builds consensus among the public procurement stakeholders. At least it makes you speak one language, that our national procurement system has these issues, and this is how the government intends to address them, and this is the timeline. These are the short-term interventions, these are the medium-term interventions, and these are the long-term interventions. It also provides a strategic and holistic view of the national public procurement reforms agenda. And this helps the government not to be fixing the procurement system in ad hoc basis, fixing the patches. It helps you to have a holistic view, and therefore you can choose what to tackle first and what to tackle next, depending on the maybe resource availability or your priorities. And finally, it leads to improved procurement efficiency, effectiveness, integrity, transparency when in the use of public funds. And I think this is the key goal. We want a procurement system which can enable the government to operate efficiently, effectively, with integrity and transparently. And of course, that's how you achieve value for money. Next. Okay, this is just a quick of best practices as you conduct an assessment in any country. Of course, you have to have very clear definition of the objectives that you are trying to achieve. You have to ground the assessment in the country context and priorities, and that's why this methodology is fit for any country, any government level, because it is built upon the specific country context. Also, make sure you involve the relevant stakeholders. In the case of Tanzania, as I will share later, almost all the stakeholders were involved, including the civil society organization, a number of stakeholders, conferences were done. Also, you have to make sure you have a qualified assessment team, which is also does not have any conflict of interest. This is very important. You have to rely on robust evidence and data. Don't just just use opinions or intuitions, but you have to really use hard data as you come into conclusion of what you think is not working, what is working, and what should be done. Identifying strengths and weaknesses is key. Developing an actionable recommendation. This must be part of the final MAPS assessment report. And very importantly, you must have a follow-up mechanism on the assessment results. You produce a good report, a good action plan, but there has to be a clear strategy of how are you going to follow up to see whether the results are being implemented, and if they're not implemented, what are the reasons, what are the challenges. Next. Okay, I'm very close to the end. On this slide, I wanted to talk about how the methodology enables the countries to, how it adapts to the local context. Again, number one, it is built under the country context. It's very context-based, but also it's not a prescription. It doesn't come to tell you, this is your problem, this is your solution. No. It's rather a lens which helps you to diagnose the procurement system. It's like you go to a doctor and then they use a microscope to see what's happening in your body. So this is a diagnostic tool. And the other important thing here is that it puts greater emphasis on engagement of stakeholders and effective engagement of stakeholders throughout the assessment process. Let's go next. So now, the case of Tanzania. In the case of Tanzania, I'm going to show you a quick roadmap about how Tanzania has been undertaking its assessment, when it started, who is involved, and what's still ahead, which is still in pipeline. And of course, later I'll show you the kind of data which were used. So basically, in December 2023, Tanzania launched its assessment process. And this was after it has submitted a request to the World Bank to provide support for the assessment. Of course, as explained in the methodology, a concept note had to be prepared, reviewed internally, and approved by the MAPS Secretariat. And then in December 2023, we had an inception workshop, which brought together the government stakeholders, the private sector stakeholders, and the civil society organizations. And again, credit to Wajibu, because Wajibu participated very effectively in that inception workshop. And of course, after that, an assessment steering committee was formed, which, as I mentioned earlier, Zeruto was one of the members of the steering committee. There was also an assessment team which was formed, as I mentioned earlier. It was a joint team between the World Bank and PPRI staff. And then what followed next was the assessment itself. And as soon as it started, there was another workshop of stakeholders to really inform the stakeholders of the progress and what is going to be done, how the data is going to be collected. And this was also done at the same time with a detailed analysis of the country context to make sure that the assessment is cognizant of the real situation in the country. After the assessment and collection of data, again, 3 types of data were collected: survey-based, sample-based, and system-based, which I'll talk about them later in the next slide. But in May, we had a validation workshop which brought together all the stakeholders, again, from the government, private sector, and civil society organizations, which again, Wajibu was a very good participant. This was then to look at the findings from the assessment and to validate them with the stakeholders, to get their opinion, their comments, whether everything has been captured or if there's anything that needs to be looked at. And then after that, so basically that is the stage where we are. Now what is happening now, there's an internal review within the World Bank which is happening. After that, the report will go to the MAPS Secretariat for approval, but also for them to approve, as I mentioned in the stakeholders involved, they will also have to involve the ITAC, Assessment Technical Advisory Group. And after that, the report will come back to the World Bank, and then it will go back to the government to then sit together and say, this is the final report, we need your go-ahead so that we can publish it. And then, of course, what will follow later is the follow-up and make sure that those recommendations are implemented. If there are any resource constraints, working with the government to see how we can support. Also linking the government with the other development partners who are interested in procurement reforms. But again, the main outcome will be the assessment report, which puts in one place the entire procurement reforms agenda of the nation, the priorities. So it becomes very easy even to engage other development partners on specific areas of reform or in general. Okay, for the rest, I'll go very quick. Let's go. So on this slide, I was trying to show you the kind of data that were utilized. So this was the system-based data. So these are data from institutions that are involved with procurement issues, procurement monitoring, procurement oversight. Now, in the case of Tanzania, 5 entities were involved: the PPRA, PPAA, PCCB, the CAG's office, and the IAG's office. So some specific data on procurement, procurement audit, procurement performance, contract awards were collected from these institutions and thoroughly analyzed to really, pick up the trends and pick up the insights from the data. Next. Yeah, we also collected data from procuring entities. A sample of 20 procuring entities was selected, and from each procuring entity, 20 cases were submitted, from which 5 cases were selected as a sample. So a total of 100 cases were reviewed. So the team visited each procuring entity to review in actual practice how they have been implementing the procurement law. In each of those criteria that we talked about, looking at how they have been applying it on specific contracts. Next. And the third category of the data was survey data from different stakeholders. 2 main groups of stakeholders were involved. We have private sector stakeholders and civil society organizations. Again, before these stakeholders were invited to respond to the questionnaires or to the surveys, a workshop was held to explain to them how the methodology works, what will be their role, and how the survey will be used, like that. And at the end of the day, we had a response from 37 private sector stakeholders and 134 responses from the civil society organization. No, sorry, I think there's a mix here. 134 was from the private sector and 37 was from the civil society organization. Sorry for this swap. Let's go to the next. Now, very close to the end, I want to leave you with only 3 recommendations. As stakeholders from the civil society organizations, the private sector, and a few from the government, I want to encourage you to really seek to understand this methodology. And there's a website here. I'm sure you have access to this presentation. Go to this website. You will get more information on how it works, how it helps the governments, and which countries have already undertaken the assessments. You will see the reports. So how this can help you is, as I mentioned earlier, it will help you as you engage with the government, because you can see specifically from this assessment report, these are the areas which the report indicates there are gaps. Then you can ask the government, how are you closing these gaps? Okay? So I think it's a very important tool for you to engage with the government, and therefore, for you to utilize it effectively, you have to understand it. Okay? That's number one. Number two, I encourage you to use this, the assessment reports as a tool for reform dialogue. Again, this relates to what I mentioned earlier, but what you need to do here, go to the MAPS initiative website, review the assessment reports for your respective countries, understand the strengths and weaknesses of the procurement system based on that report, look at the recommendations which were put forward in that report, look at the agreed action plan. It's all there in the report. And then go to Mr. Government, say, hey, you said you're going to do this, and it's here in the report. How far are you? Okay? And finally, I urge you to be champions of this methodology, especially for countries that have not undertaken this kind of assessment yet. Advise the government, why can't you do a comprehensive review of the procurement system? There is a tool here, a very comprehensive tool, internationally recognized standard. And you can show examples. Look at this country X has done it, this country Y has done it, and this is the outcome. So these are my 3 key recommendations to you, and I think they are very easy to remember. If you think you may not, you can take a picture of this so that as you go back, you can make use. Now, finally, I'm wrapping up. 1 minute. Go next. Next. It's just to show you previous slide, please. Go back. Yes. Just to give you a global view of countries that have undertaken the MAPS assessment or assessment of their procurement systems using this methodology. Now, on this map, you are looking at countries that have already concluded, and those which are still ongoing now, and those that have planned to undertake. So again, no need to talk about each country. You can go to the website, you will see all this. Next slide. Here again, I don't intend to talk about each of these boxes, but when you go to the website, you will see each country that has already completed their assessment. What you will see is the name of the country, the time when the assessment was conducted. You will also see whether the assessment was a core methodology assessment or it was a supplemental assessment, meaning that was it an assessment of the entire procurement system or an assessment of a specific area? For example, was it for sustainable public procurement alone, or maybe was it for e-procurement only, or maybe was it for the national level government, or was it for a state level government? So you can see that information, and then those blue lines that you see, those are hyperlinks. Those are links to the reports. So from here, you can read the report. Everything is in there. There's no secret. Next. Yeah, again, these are the countries. You see Zambia, Uganda. Tanzania is not on this scorecard yet because the assessment has not been finalized. But I think by next year, probably by the beginning of next year, you might see also Tanzania on this map. Next, as I finish. Okay, now just to leave you with some resources, this is the website to the MAPS Secretariat. It's called mapsinitiative.org. They also have Twitter and LinkedIn accounts. You can go there, you can learn a lot. All the resources that I was talking about are there. But on the next slide, can you go next slide? Just to give you a hint of when you go in that website, what resources you can find. The presentation about what is MAPS, the video that we just played here, you'll find it there. A description of the process on how MAPS assessment is conducted, templates of how to conduct it, it's there. Checklist on the documents that are required, checklist on the stakeholders, which stakeholders must be involved in assessment. It's all there. But also, you will see a profile of the MAPS assessors, the people who have been certified by the MAPS Secretariat. And that means if you want to engage them, you can as well use that as a resource. Finally, let's go last one. Yeah, again, there's also an e-learning module you can see in the website where you can take a self-paced learning on how to conduct the assessment. Everything that I was explaining to you, it takes you in more details and it gives you more practical step-by-step. Last one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And in order to move things along and not to eat too much into your lunch, I think we will have to eat a little bit into your lunch. So please bear with us, but we'll try not to eat too much. I would like Abdulu to give us a little bit of his experience, his broad experience from within government and from outside of government on the effects that procurement systems have, and 3 main things that you have learned from that, hopefully, and how your experience is going to teach, what your experience is going to teach us to answer some of the questions that were asked this morning and the presentation, the problems in the presentation today. Is that a possibility? Yes.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. You are not hungry yet, I think. We just taken tea. Thanks, the presenter. That was a nice piece of work, and you have reduced part of my work because I expected to do some bits and bits on procurement, but I think you have covered it all. I think you dwelt a lot on procedures, standards, and the way we do this. That's great. So mine, I'll go to some examples in some of these countries, how they do their procurement standards, and the lot. Thanks, the moderator. I hope you will not ring the bell if I take too long to talk, but I will try as much as possible. Now, for those people, okay, the moderator has already mentioned my name. My name is Engineer Gabriel Bujuru. I worked with PDC for a period of time. I was supervising the Song Song project. I think the World Bank mentioned about that. That was a quality project. I supervised that on behalf of the TPDC, and then I supervised the what we call Mnazi Bay gas Mtwara to Dasram. I think one of the moderators mentioned about it, the situation we went through during attending to that project. But then after TPDC, I joined briefly with Symbion Power on the gas side, because I'm an expert on the side of the natural gas utilization for power generation. And I have done a few consulting works, and now I am with Energy Cards. This is a local NGO in Dasram. I'm working as a consultant to petroleum and other energy-based projects. In our industry, we say petroleum, but in the normal field, you talk about oil and gas. It's basically the same thing, but because we start from the ground, you start from the surface, and we start from the subsurface. That's why petroleum is more relevant than oil and gas as it stands alone. Maybe for those who don't know about petroleum or oil and gas as we speak, it has 2 segments, 3 segments as such. You have the upstream segment that takes the oil when you find it from the subsurface to bring to the surface, and then you have midstream where you process the oil and the gas to usable state, and then there is downstream where you distribute it and market it. And in my case on the procurement, as I mentioned, that he has already mentioned it in detail, so I don't want to go through that. We talk of two kind of stages in the industry. We have the mature industry stage that encompasses most of the so-called developed countries, and then we have immature industry encompasses most of the developing countries. Why mature and why immature? And that has an impact on the type of procurement or on the system you applied in during procurement. In the mature industry, like I said, in developed countries, the way they achieve their procurement go through establishing relationship with major supply companies, because most of these international oil companies, they own, or either they own or they take acreage, and they produce oil, sell oil, pay tax, and all what is due. So they do their procurement in a particular system where you have established suppliers. They can go all the same, the one we talk about, bidding and so forth and so forth. But normally, because oil activities, oil business, takes a lot of procurement funds. Most of the funds go to procurement. Maybe 60% also go to procure facilities, equipment, and so forth and so forth. So procurement is of great importance. So, because oil is a unique, I would say, a unique field. It's you have to be very careful when you are undertaking your procurement activities, because it involves a lot of money and so forth, and a lot of energy and a lot of effort and expertise. So there are situations where you have to go through. You have to establish your customer base, who you procure from, because you don't want to try on the error, because it's very expensive to undertake business in here. So you have to establish, whether in drilling companies, whether exploration companies, what they do, they have limited suppliers. They reach those suppliers, of course, transparently, because this, for them it's on they put it on the website, and people just apply. It's already an e-procurement type. So they apply through the website, and then they assess it, and award given, and so forth and so forth. But on the other side, in the non-mature industry like ours, here I can mention maybe Tanzania, Nigeria, and Angola as examples. All have the regulatory system they have mentioned time and again, and this leads to it prescribes how procurement is achieved. And I remember in Tanzania a few years back, we used to do manual bidding. We have to request for bids, and they have submit bids, and we have to evaluate manually and award manually. And as you know, that's susceptible, as they have mentioned yesterday, ahead today, susceptible to what would I say, bribe or corruption. That's it. And now we have moved to some e-procurement that yesterday's presentation made from I think Moshiro from PPRA. We've moved to procurement. But I must mention here that there is some difference in developing countries. For example, in ours, I know the oil belongs to the nation, the state, and the state doesn't undertake exploration phase because of its risk nature. So we invite international oil companies. They come and they do their they take their own risk to do some exploration, and if they discover, then we share the resources, because we are the owner. Then the nation is the owner. They have a system of sharing the resources. But Otherwise, they take the risk, and if the government is to participate, then it's after exploration stage, development stage. At this stage also, the government in the developed countries, I said the international oil companies come and they invest their own money, and take the risk, and they have the system, more or less, as I mentioned, in the developed field or developed well, whatever you call it, world. They have the system of identifying. Again, it's transparent, but it's another way of identifying proper suppliers of equipment, suppliers of logistics, suppliers of all what's needed is procured from a system they have. But other local staff, like the supplies of local services, like TPTC will undertake that, then we follow the PPRA procurement system. But for major works, then the risk taker, I mean the international company, they do that at their own resources. I will mention a bit to you that, for example, we talked about the offshore oil and gas here, offshore gas, which is under development or under discussion for development for LNG project. Exploration itself has eaten a chunk of approximately $400 billion US. So you can imagine if the nation, if the state, like Tanzania, was involved in the exploration, spending $4 billion, that includes discovery wells and the non-discovery wells. That means dry wells. How would the public understand? How would you understand this? The TPDC or the government? They will not understand how you spend so much money, and they, as you know, the gas has been discovered, but it's still underground. So it might not even be used or developed if there is no further resources. It's anticipated approximately 42 billion will be required, maybe 42 to 45 billion will be US dollars will be required to develop that LNG project in the Lin district. So you can imagine the money involved, and that, as I mentioned, is a big chunk will go to the procurement. So it's very risky. And when you do other procurement stages, there are issues of the interference here and there, the government, the delays involved. When Moshiro was talking about NEST, initially we have 10 TANEPs. I remember we have 45 days to bid, 45 days to wait, and I don't know, to look at the project, to analyze, to interpret the bids and so forth. What I'm trying to say here, it takes a long time. Sometimes this one of these activities, the oil and the gas, can't afford for that a long time because a lot of changes would have been made. If you wait for that, some of the equipment the price might change, and then you run into dispute with the would-be supplier. So we have to look at the way how to smoothen that, and the coming of e-procurement, I think, will assist that and help that, and you know the system is transparent and accountable to that matter, and that will reduce also the price of the product coming out of the underground. That means the oil and the gas. So for the takeaway here, I think for those who undertake these activities, they have to understand that it's expensive to explore, develop, and distribute or sell oil. That's why the price, you see the price changes and so forth and so forth. But by being effectively transparent and kuwajibika na kuwa wawazi na kutumia taratibu ambazo ni za uwazi, bila interference ya serikali itasaidia katika kupunguza gharama za kazi zetu au gharama za mafuta yatakayotoka, na bei labda inaweza kuwa nafuu, hata gesi ikawa nafuu kwa matumizi yetu na ya vizazi vijavyo. Nawashukuru sana. Asanteni. Thank you.
Asante sana Bwana Juru. Kabla sijaitisha maswali, naomba Bwana Teo utupe experience yako ndani ya NCA Global in implementing procurement systems and what you are learning from their implementation from the non-government side, and we see if we have the same very complex problems that they have within government, or whether our problems are different.
Good afternoon. Dini mbalimbali. I can't hear. Dini mbalimbali. Upendo haki na amani. Thank you. So as introduced earlier, my name's Theonat Mushi. I'm the Grants and Compliance Manager from Norwegian Church Aid. And Norwegian Church Aid appreciates the opportunity to share lessons learned from implementing our procurement system. So we have quite a number of lessons learned, but because we have very limited time, so I'm going to prioritize the best 3. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce Norwegian Church Aid as an international NGO with 22 country offices worldwide. And in Tanzania, we are working with FBOs and NGOs, and we have 15 implementing partners. So all the country offices and the implementing partners are complying to the global HR manual, but there is a room to have your own thresholds, but they should not override the thresholds provided by the global HR manual. So in the course of implementing this global HR manual, there are some lessons learned. And the first one to mention is the periodic procurement reviews that we do. So for NCA Tanzania, we have the head office who oversees our procurement processes. So they do periodic reviews of all the procurement process just to make sure that we are complying to the global HR manual. And for our partners, NCA Tanzania, we also do periodic financial reviews, especially on procurement, just to make sure that they are also complying to the procurement procedures and standards. And so this has helped us to detect issues before it's too late and find ways to navigate or to solve the issues before it's too late. And another issue is we do assessment, we do procurement assessment. We are not applying maps, unfortunately, so we have our own tool that we use to do the assessment. So with this tool, it has also helped us to identify capacity gaps, especially on procurement. So at the end of the day, we design capacity building plan on the basis of the gaps identified on the assessment. And then we design capacity building interventions to bridge the gaps. So this has also helped NCA, Tanzania, and implementing partners to comply to the procurement requirements and also donor requirements. And last on the list, but as mentioned, we have quite a number of lessons learned, but I'm looking at my moderator here. She just wants me to complete. So the last on the list is the zero tolerance on fraud and corruption. So this has also helped us a lot because staff are quite aware that wakipiga inakula kwao. So they take a lot of precautions to make sure that they are not involved in fraud and corruption. And we also do like periodic training to staff and our partners on the fraud and corruption topic, just to remind them on the do's and don'ts. So NCA does not tolerate fraud and corruption. So if you are caught on any act of the breach of the ACTA Alliance Code of Conduct, so we apply ACTA Alliance Code of Conduct, your contract is immediately terminated. So this has also really helped us to ensure that we are on track with compliance to procurement policies and procedures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we should clap for our presenter and my two discussants. I have learned a lot from what you've presented, and I'm really happy. Sasa hivi naomba niitishe maswali. Kama kuna maswali au tuna njaa bado watu. Hapana, we must have some. So, because the earlier presentation started at the other end of the room, I will start at this end. And I see just one hand. Please, yes. Nobody is there. Mike, tunaomba Mike.
Okay, thank you, presenter and the panelists for the very informative presentation, especially on the maps. And just for a layman like me to understand the scoring mechanism for maps, how does it work? And if there is any case of complete failure of the assessment of the maps. But for the oil and gas, one question that probably I would like to raise to Engineer Bujuru is the industry itself, because I know it involves a lot of, first, public resources that are underground, but second, the private sector who is exploring, developing, producing, selling the product, and of course, the number of procurements that are linked with the process. So when you look at the entire process, there is no unique procurement process that will be involved. We know there are integrated companies that they use their subsidiaries to supply services to the industry, and we know the cost of it will be deducted from the resources. And taking a good example on what he mentioned on the LNG, we know the LNG now, it's the talk of today. It will spend 52 billion US dollar for the resources, not from the investors, from the resources. Meaning that once this project is commercialized, the money these guys are investing will be recouped from the sale of the gas, from the sale of Tanzanian gas. And probably not least on this 42 billion, even the marketing, selling, and all risks involved in the process will be on the expenses of our resources. I want to get a reflection from Engineer Bujuru. How is this put into the procurement process? Not only for Bujuru, even if the procurement guy, if they can just shed a light, how are these one being taken into consideration when you talk about e-procurement, when you talk about procurement regulations and the PPP arrangement? That's one. But second is the involvement of the negotiation process and contract management. We have seen cases in the energy sector where most of procurement, first they are done under emergency. That's one. Second, tumeona madudu, and they have taken us to the expenses of our resources. How these procurement lessons has helped us, especially for the World Bank, has helped us to tailor our procurement to fit into the lessons that we are learning today. Asante sana.
Asante kwa swali. Naomba tuchukue maswali kadhaa, alafu nitawapa nafasi ya kujibu. Asante, yes.
Thank you. Just a few clarification questions we wanted to ask our World Bank colleague. One is on the entities that they say they collected data from. Maybe would love to know why the local government was not one of them, considering a lot of procurement happens down there and sometimes it's not captured even in the PPRA. Also, maybe just to confirm, the assessment is just for mainland, right? Not Zanzibar, because that's a different ball game. If you could also answer that, and if that's the case, is the World Bank foreseeing any assessment on the Zanzibar side? Because we have seen a lot of support now going there, so it might be interesting. Also, it would be good to know how far back was the data used, that was the data that was in the maps tool, how far back, and also maybe just to tie to that is when was the maps, the last maps, when was it done, or was it ever done in Tanzania, or this is the first maps? And then also another question is the selection of the regions. They are predominantly urban, so we were wondering how these regions were, like there's no mix of urban, semi-urban, rural, so it's quite an interesting, and I wonder if the findings will be realistic to the context of Tanzania. And then the last one is, I was curious to find out that the DPs were not part of the survey data, considering we do a lot of co-procurement. I know the World Bank maybe doesn't do procurement, but for example, the EU, we do some procurement together with the government. So if we are not included in the surveys, that means that data is missing, and it doesn't give you a realistic picture of, you know. So yeah, I'm sorry for the tough questions.
No, good tough questions. We like tough questions. Very good. Kuna swali lingine? Sijaona. Ah, yes.
Yeah, so maybe I'll stand. So thank you for provoking us. Maybe you have not done our job, but I think some of the question Emmanuel is going to respond, and some I'm going to respond also. But I think there is one thing I need to mention on the usage of the outcome of the report, MAPS assessment, the recommendations, reform agenda. And this exactly, it is on pillar number 4, accountability, transparency. In my presentation conclusion, I said that there is no explicit provision in the law saying that the citizen engagement is mandatory, right? And it's clearly captured in the report, and it's clearly captured in the recommendation. One of the priority area we made this focus. Now, the problem we have in our countries, you know, it depends the appetite of the leadership, right? PPRI, they say we are ready to take this because we need, because ambition for PPRI now with the NEST is to go to the community. And I think we heard also my brother Moshurin yesterday talking about the app, mobile app and others, which has been going to the grassroots. Now, without the citizen engagement monitoring procurement process, it's going to be very tough. Now, for me, I argue NGOs, you need to fight this one. Use this as a tool to engage the government to get the engagement as a mandatory in the law. You may stay here and say this is not included, this we are going to do that, but at the end of the day, they don't listen. Because the appetite, it will depend on what you already provide in the framework. Now, let's go now to the specific comments. On Zanzibar. Zanzibar, the issue of procurement in this country is not a union matter. So Zanzibar, they have their own law. So when we started, we received one letter from the government that we want to do map assessment in Tanzania. But we asked, okay, Tanzania, when we started, okay, we get stuck. So we decided that we started also with the mainland. So Zanzibar is starting next year, right? For Zanzibar, because of what I said. Yeah? They have requested already. So they supplement the letter which we received from the Ministry of Finance. Unfortunately, the way it works, the Ministry of Finance, which deals with the World Bank, is one. So anyway, that's something we should not discuss. We are not on that. On the data, maybe the AU. So the methodology which was used, we collect data for the 5 years. 5 years. We collected that submit the case or contract which completed, because not on the 50% which is done, not for all contracts which was completed from planning to the end for the last 5 years. And that's why you see in the data, for each entity, we requested 400 datas. So from there we pick. So one of those datas, we don't ask this is coming from AU, this is coming from donor, this is coming from, even our contracts which are being funded by the World Bank, they are part of the contract which was were selected. So AU could be there, ADB could be there, KFWB, EAU could be there, KFW will be there. Because at the end, even if you are going to publish the results, we are not going to disclose those data. We are going to say case number 1 to up to case 100. So that's where I think I need to stop in terms of the contract management and the PPP projects. The procurement process which we will have, like my brother has been articulate, in the bank, use all the guidelines. For those who have been working in the World Bank, we had the green line and the red book, right? We used to say that when it comes to PPP, when the private sector are selected for PPP projects, even their procurement process should follow our guidelines. Now came in what my brother said. It's very expensive to undertake a procurement process using this procedure which we are following. Now, under a new regulation now, we are saying the service provider or the preferred part will be selected using World Bank procurement guidelines or procurement regulations, but subsequent procurement process will follow commercial terms. Why? Because we know what is happening, what my brother was talking about. Even now in our law in Tanzania, Public Procurement Act of 2023 and the regulation of 2004, they're segregating the entity which are doing business and the pure public entity on the procurement process to increase efficiency. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for helping us to answer some of the questions. One more question, if there is any, before we go to lunch. I know you all look hungry, but yes, we will. Kama kuna swali, kama hakuna, I'll go back to my panel to answer some of the questions, yeah? And we end. Yes, so I will start here, because you were last.
Asante. Dini mbalimbali. Naitwa Idi Muameli, natokea Babati. Nilikuwa na maswali matatu. Lakini nilichokiogopa hapa tangu jana nikiuliza sipati yale majibu ambayo nataka.
Naomba uharakishe kidogo.
Sawa sawa. Swala kwanza kuhusu ushirikishwaji wa wananchi. Injinia wangu hapa amesema hakuna kipengele cha sheria kinachosema ushiriki wa wananchi kwa lazima. Mimi ninavyoelewa na elimu yangu ndogo ya darasa la pili kwamba sheria ya nchi hii, sheria mama ni katiba. Kuna ibara inasema serikali itapata mamlaka kwa wananchi. Yaani wananchi wana mamlaka kwa serikali. Hicho kipengele anachotafuta mheshimiwa wangu hapa, ibara ya 8 nimekumbushwa kwamba hichi kipengele tunachotafuta ni kipi? Kama mama amesema nitakupikia chakula, baba atasema sinunui mahindi, tunatafuta nini katikati hapa? La pili, kuhusu hawa watu wanajiita World Bank. Nilikuwa nataka nifahamu kwenye kuingia ubia kwenye makampuni makubwa. Hivi nyie mkitoa fedha zenu, mkitoaga fedha zenu, mkipata taarifa kama hizi tunazodokezewa hapa kwamba kuna madudu, sijui kuna hela zimepotea, hakuna namna ya kuzifuata nyuma? Ikiwa kama nchi yetu imeshindwa kuwasaidia kwamba kwa mfano kikao cha ndani cha makabidhiano, mikakati yenu inatoka trilioni 20. Kwa wananchi itatoka labda trilioni 2. Hii 18 na kwenda. Nyie benki hamwezi mkafuata huku nyuma? Yaani mfumo gani mmeweka kufuatilia fedha zenu kama zimetumika vibaya? La tatu, kuhusu hawa World Bank, nitolee mfano wao kwamba mimi kama mwananchi, raia wa kawaida, mkulima wa mchicha, ninahitaji kwenda kwa mkurugenzi kutaka taarifa zenu. Sheria haionyeshi kama mimi na makosa kuhoji, lakini ujue napokwenda kufanya mahojiano kutaka taarifa kwa mkurugenzi, ataniambia wewe ni nani. Na yuko pale kwa katiba imempa mamlaka au ofisini kwa dhamana yangu. Kwamba yuko ofisini mkurugenzi, yuko ofisini huyo TAKUKURU, yuko ofisini MDC, yuko nani. kwa mamlaka yangu, yani amechukua dhamana yangu kwamba kama mimi sipo hawezi kufanya uongozi. Sasa ataniambia wewe kama nani mtafanya nini ama mtatuambia nini wananchi kuhusu kadhia hii, kwamba tufanyeje sasa mimi kama mwananchi kwamba nikitaka taarifa nipate bila kikwazo. Asante sana.
Nashukuru kwa maswali mazuri. Sasa naomba nimpe Bwana Teo aanze ku
dini mbalimbali, upendo wake na amani. So I'll respond to the question about how are the lessons learned help to adjust our procurement processes. So in the course of implementing our procurement process, like I mentioned, the few lessons learned. So these lessons learned help us to adjust our processes. So when we note that in some areas the processes are not working well, so we strengthen the processes. And if we feel that we need to introduce new processes, we do that. So give an example. In the course of implementing the procurement process, we noted that while mitigating fraud and corruption in procurement, complaints handling system was a good way to mitigate fraud and corruption, because we are getting a lot of whistleblowers from the system, and we are able to identify the issues. So what we did, we strengthened our complaints handling mechanism system by introducing it to our implementing partners, as well as having a focal person in place. So we had to design a very good structure to enable implementing partners and beneficiaries use the platform to come up with issues that are not going right. So that is one example. Another example, it's about risk management. So we noted that sometimes we in the course of implementing procurement, and then some risks come up. So we had to design a risk mitigation plan, a risk mitigation strategy, and we designed a tool. It's called Risk Management Matrix that helps us to identify all the risk, to assess all the risk that can come up during the process of procurement and mitigation measures. Thank you.
Asante moderator. Nafikiri I had basically one question from Priva, which was in two parts, I think. On the cost recovery, the involvement, the capital involved in the exploration and development, and then with it's invested by the IOCs, which need to be recovered. You know, when we get the oil, we have a mechanism how to share the resources. The investor, he has a method of what we call cost recovery or cost oil. They have to recover what the investment, and a certain arrangement, not that you recover once, but under a certain arrangement in step by step, so that at the same time the government get some money in the initial phase. As you know, the initial phase is always the sweet one. It's like the first child is always a sweet one. So there is a process of recovering the resources, and so if there is recovery of the resources, that means there is a way, should be a way to audit the expenditure of which these international companies do. They invest well and good, but we can't just let them recover funds not eligible according to the contract. So the contract spells what will be recovered, and what's not spelled there, that means it will be rejected during audit. So we audit their expenditure, and they put the record right between them, and that's why we have annual programs where we discuss program the following year, but also the expenditure in the previous year. so that we keep the log of the expenditure, which will eventually lead to the appropriate recoveries. So that's taken care of. And contract management, I think the World Bank has spoken about it. I don't want to go into further detail on that, but I don't know if there is lessons. I don't know if there is anything more than what he has already said, but maybe I will move to just a bit is winding up. Was it Eid or somebody who spoke in Swahili? Aliongea kwa Kiswahili pale. Alizungumza one item alizungumza ni ushirikishwaji. Kwa upande wetu sisi watu upande wa mafuta oil and gas project, ushirikishwaji ni mkubwa. I tell you. Tunawa involve wananchi from the word go. Yani tunapoanza kazi ya utafutaji, uendelezaji mpaka uzalishaji, hata tunapokuwa tunadistribute. Wananchi tunawa involve, tuna engage thoroughly, tunaeleza thoroughly. Lakini hata hiyo mfano aliotoa Mtwara, we engage them. I was part of that engagement. Tunakuwa na vikao wawakilishi wao, mikutano ya hadhara, wanaelezwa na kwa undani. Lakini kama unavyofahamu, kila mahara unapokuwa unaeleza kitu, kuna watu wanakuwa na mawazo tofauti. Hata hapa tukianza kuchambua, lazima kutakuwa na mawazo ambayo kidogo yatatofautiana na wengine, ambao yatashangaza. Inaweza kuwa mmoja au wawili, but still ni mawazo tofauti. Kwa hiyo ni vitu ambavyo vinajitokeza ni vya kawaida, lakini otherwise projects tunakuwa open. Ni kitu cha msingi katika vitu ambavyo tuna highlight mwanzoni kabisa katika listi ni public engagement. Tunawa engage vizuri sana, tunaeleza vizuri sana, tunawaeleza kwamba eventually huu ni mradi wao. Yani unaposema wananchi ni mradi wao, you destroy it, you are destroying yourself. It's like taking a gun and shooting your own leg, ambao utashindwa kutembea. Sasa utakuwa umejisaidia au utakuwa umejiumiza. Kwa hiyo tunawa engage, tunakuwa ni part and parcel, na tunaendelea vizuri sana. Na mara pengi at the end of the day wanashukuru kwa sababu wananufaika. Sasa hivi gesi tukianza kudistribute ya majumbani, Lindi na Mtwara wana gesi majumbani watu, ambapo sehemu nyingine hata Dar es Salaam hawajapata. Na kwa hiyo tunawachukua Kilwa, tumekuwa toka zamani. Kilwa huko Songo kwa mfano tulikoanzia, walikuwa hawana maji safi, tumetengeneza maji safi, tumetengeneza umeme. Ilikuwa hakuna umeme kule kwa sababu ni kisiwani, lakini tumewazalishia umeme, wanatumia umeme, wana miradi ya kutumia umeme. Kwa hiyo they are happy, they are making happy. Lakini kama nilivyosema, kila kitu unapofanya kuna mtu ambaye atakiona kizuri kwa reason zake, lakini kwa kweli miradi hii ni ya uwazi na inajitahidi, na tunaomba nyinyi na wenyewe kama wananchi na tunaoelewa kama tunapokuwa humu, tujaribu kusaidia katika promote haya ni maendeleo yetu. Hakuna mtu atakaye kuletea maendeleo mengine. Hata watu wanakuja, makampuni yanakuja yanapita, yanatafanya kazi, yanapita. Sisi ni wananchi na tuna jukumu la kujiendeleza wenyewe, kuendeleza wananchi wetu, kuwafafanulia na kuwasaidia inapobidi. Asante sana.
Okay. So I'm also going to respond to the questions which my colleague has not touched upon, so I'm not going to repeat what Engineer Raymond has already addressed. Let me start with the question from Priva regarding the scoring mechanism when conducting the procurement assessment using the MAPS methodology. So you asked whether, what is the scoring mechanism, whether there is a pass or fail, something like that. So my answer is that so when you are doing assessment, under each of the assessment criteria, which I mentioned, 210 criteria, there are two levels. Level number one, you do a qualitative analysis. You look at the existing laws, the existing policies, the existing regulations, and see what does the legal framework provide about that specific assessment criteria. And then number two, you go to quantitative analysis. Now on the quantitative, you collect data from the field, so you do numbers. And then after that, the next step is to do a gap analysis. Gap analysis is then to look at, this is the qualitative position under this assessment criteria, and this is what the numbers are telling me. What is the international best practice? Is there a gap here? Now, the gaps, there are three types of gaps. Either a substantive gap, if what you see as a weakness, the addressing of that weakness will require things like changing the law. It will require intervention from outside the existing procurement system. It's not a matter of telling the procuring entity, hey, you need to do better on this. You need to go maybe change the law, change the policy. So that will be a substantive gap. Another type of a gap will be a minor gap. A minor gap is where you see a weakness which can easily be addressed within the existing procurement system. You don't need to change a law or anything. And then finally is a no gap. So I would say these are the scoring mechanisms. It's either there's a substantive gap or a minor gap or no gap. It's not an A, B, C, D, E, F, pass or fail. Regarding the question from my sister there, I didn't catch your name, so pardon me, I won't mention your name. So some of the questions you have raised were addressed by my colleague, Engineer Raymond, but I think what was not addressed was about the involvement of the local governments in the data collection. So you indicated that, why LGAs were not involved. In fact, they were. So you may have seen there was a Mwanza City Council was one of the procuring entities where we collected data. There was also Arusha Municipal Council. Yeah, those are the two I can remember quickly. So we did cover all the types of procuring entities within the government. You also asked whether this was the first MAPS assessment in Tanzania or not. So the answer is, so this is the first under the new methodology. But before that, in 2007, Tanzania benefited from a pilot program of the MAPS methodology. So that was the time when it was being developed, and a few countries were selected to do a pilot, and Tanzania was one of them. So if you look at it that way, you will say this is the second assessment, but under the fully established methodology, it is the first. And then the other question was a mix of the regions or urbans. So yeah, so the mix of the regions, again, the selection was mainly looking at, we wanted to use the entities that have procurement activities, because you have other very small local government authorities which has very small procurement activities, which if you assess an entity which has all type of procurement activities, you are going to capture the challenges that they encounter, at more levels, like, when they're doing heavy, complex procurement, what challenge do they encounter? When they're doing very small procurement activities, what issues do they encounter? But if you go to the very small entity, you are likely to only have information about the small contracts. So again, there's also issue of resources here. You could not include everyone in the sample, but the sampling was done objectively in a way that there's no aspect which we could not be addressed through the sample that was established. So I think the rest were addressed by Engineer Raymond. Let me go to the question of Eid Mohammed about how the World Bank is involved when there are issues of Madudu, where there are issues. So I'll tell you that the World Bank has a very strict accountability mechanism and integrity mechanism when it comes to projects that are financed by the World Bank. And the accountability mechanism covers almost all aspects. You have the environmental and social, you have the public financial management, you have the issues of corruption and things. So therefore, there is a very effective one. So anytime the World Bank is financing a project, the government must put in place an environmental and social framework, which under the social, it also includes if people are affected by the project being implemented, how do they complain, how are the complaints addressed. Now the issues of corruption, if it's through procurement, then the procurement framework applies. And I wanted to leave you with one example. So the World Bank has been financing a project for boosting tourism in the southern regions. It's called the Regrow Project. And I think toward the end of last year, there was a few citizens who complained that the government was using the project resources, but also at the same time, there were some citizens around the project area were being mistreated. So those were allegations, okay? So what happened is the bank did an investigation And the outcome was that the disbursement for that project was suspended. So within the World Bank, we have, in addition to the normal day-to-day supervision, we have an organ which sits in Washington, D.C., which is responsible for these kind of investigations. So whenever there's any allegations, they come in. And when they come here, they don't speak to Raymond, they don't speak to me, they go straight to where the complaint is coming from. So, and they do their work very independently. They are not influenced by anyone. So those who are involved in the projects, like the project team, they have no way to influence that team that does the investigation. So I just wanted to leave you with that there is a very effective mechanism within the World Bank to ensure that the funds which the World Bank disburses for project, for specific projects, they are only used for that purpose, and there is no any harm to the communities or to the societies as an outcome of that project. I'll pause here.
Very much. I think we're ready for lunch. Yes? So can we have one more round of applause for our presenters, our presenter and our discussants? Thank you very much. And thank you, a round of applause for yourselves as well, for eating into your lunch by 20 minutes. Okay, so thank you. I think we've ended this session. I will hand it back to Moses. Moses,
okay, a big round of applause for them as they leave the stage. Thank you very much. That was a very informative session with a lot of knowledge that we have gained through the assessment of the procurement process. It's now lunchtime. We are going for lunch, and lunch is 1 hour. Lunch is 1 hour, so we are expecting to be back at 3:45. Yeah? 44. 2:44, sorry, 2:44. Yeah. So let's come back at 2:44. Just 1 hour, please. Let's be punctual because time is really limiting. As you can see, our program, the next topic 5, the position of non-state actors, was supposed to start at 2. So we are 45 minutes late, but we'll catch up, no problem. We'll see how we can catch up. Now the next topic is very hot. All the questions of whether the public is in the law or is not, we shall hear from that session topic 5, whether we are in or we are not in, we shall know.